It seems to me that I bonds are really hot lately, and I think that's for good reason because um, while many people may know about stocks or bonds or even cryptocurrencies now, I bonds are kind of this asset class that no one is interested in if inflation is low. So indeed, from May 1st of this year to October 31st of this year, so basically 6 months, any I bonds that were purchased within this time span will yield 9.62%. I'll go over the calculation. What I want to go over is, and what I was personally interested in was what the I bond yield would be for the next 6 months. And we have our answer here. So disappointingly, only 6.48%. So that's what you're looking for. There it is. How's the rate actually determined? That's a great question. And for that, we can go to this brochure, the Q&A, I guess revised in 2022, but it seems like it's pretty old. Let's see, zoom in a little bit. So how is it actually calculated? Well, the composite rate or the final yield on the I bond is going to be the fixed rate plus 2 times the semi-annual inflation rate plus the product of the fixed rate and the semi-annual inflation rate. So let's unpack that just a little bit. So like I mentioned, the composite rate is the yield that you would get for 6 months. I guess it would be the annualized yield that you would get for a 6 months period. And an example of the six month period would be this. So a fixed rate is a rate that the Treasury Department would determine, and this actually varies, even though it's called fixed. But the reason it's called fixed is because like once it's set for this particular, I guess fixed isn't even the right word. What it really is like a base rate, okay? And this fixed rate actually changes from every 6 month period to every other 6 month period. Or I guess I should say it could change. The semi-annual inflation rate is actually computed relatively statistically. It's the percent change in a measure called the CPI-U. So the CPI-U is actually slightly different than the CPI. The CPI is, I would say, the most commonly looked at measure of inflation. The Federal Reserve doesn't look at CPI. They look at PC, which is the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index, I think something like that. But the CPI for all urban consumers, CPI-U, is slightly different. I'm not exactly sure how this is calculated or how it differs, but you can go on the Bureau of Labor Statistics and see what the index is. So the Treasury Department uses the non-seasonally adjusted CPI-U. So this is like a number. This represents the index in September 2021. Let's see. So this index, the number by itself doesn't actually mean very much. What's really interesting is to see the change in this index over time. But regardless of what the number actually is, the more interesting thing is to see the change in it, and because that's going to affect the I bonds yield. So according to this website, tips, I guess, like Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. Thank you. I don't know what you call this, the hover over text. But according to this website, the CPI-U in March 2022 was 287.5, and in September 2022 it was 296.8. So take the change in this, so like this number divided by this number minus 1, and the monthly and the change over these 6 months is 3.24%. So this is actually quite a bit lower than the change in CPI-U over the previous period of 6 months. In the previous period of 6 months, it went from 274 to 287, which made for a 6-month change of 4.8%. So you may ask, like, 4.8% and 3.24% are not this high, and indeed it's because, remember, uh, add we take 2 times the semi-annual inflation rate. I should note that the fixed rate in both of these, both the current 6-month stretch and the previous 6-month stretch, have been 0. And let's see, I'm pretty sure, yeah, they talk about the fixed rate. So my impression of why, my understanding of why the fixed rate is even in existence in the first place is when inflation's pretty low, the change in CPI-U is not going to be very high. As a result, to make I-bonds even like slightly appealing, there's got to be a little bit of a fixed rate. And then this third term is kind of weird. I'm not exactly sure like what not exactly sure what the third term does, but this is the equation that they use. It's a little bit complicated, but if you kind of decompose it into steps, it's it makes a little bit more sense. And it's 2 times the semi-annual inflation rate because they're looking, because the end result should be the I-bond is linked to annual inflation. So we saw here, this is the inflation in the previous 6 months. So if you multiply that by 2, then you can kind of extrapolate 6 months of inflation into 12 months of inflation, just multiplying by 2, just by multiplying by 2. One thing you may ask is, if I-bond yields reset on May 1st and November 1st of each month, why are we looking at the March to September stretch or the September to March CPI stretch? And that's because if you look back to this brochure, let's see, I think I was reading this, I read this somewhere. Actually, I think it might have been on this page. Sorry. Okay, I don't know where I read that from, but I do know that that March to September is the correct period. And because the Bureau of Labor Statistics released September 2022 CPI-U number, we know the 6-month change is going to be 3.24% for the next 6 months. And this next 6 months is going to be I-bonds issued between November 1st, 2022, and then May 1st, 2023. Of course, if you are going to buy I-bonds, you'll want to buy them a couple days before the deadline. And in this case, the Treasury Department advocates October 20th to be the cutoff. One tip about I-bonds, which is in some article I read, is that the interest on I-bonds is basically deposited into your account on the 1st of every month, which means if you're going to buy I-bonds, you should buy them towards the end of the previous month. And if you're going to sell I-bonds, you should sell them towards the beginning of the month. That way, you can almost kind of get like a time arbitrage. But let's see, was there anything else? Oh yeah, the other thing I did want to mention was because the fixed rate component is part of the composite rate, there is a possibility that the rate of I-bond yields over the next 6 months could be higher than 6.48. And the reason it could be higher than 6.48 is because if the fixed rate goes from 0% to something that's not 0. However, I think my opinion, and from what I've read, I think that's quite unlikely. And that's because, and why is that unlikely? That's because the fixed rate has been 0% for quite a long time, like we saw here. Inflation is high enough where I don't think the government is too willing, or the government does not need to set a baseline rate in the form of the fixed rate. The calculation of the 9.6% was here. It was 2 times the semi-annual rate, which was this. Okay, and as a quick follow-up, this is, I guess, what you would expect to make if you bought ibond before October 28th. So it's basically the average of like May 2020 to November 2020's rates and November 2022. Sorry, I might have said 2020. I meant 2022. And this is the rate for November 2022 to May 2023. So yeah, it's just averages of these two, so it's 8%. Um, of course, while you may be making 8% on paper, that's just keeping up with inflation. So I guess in economic terms, this would be, you could say like you are making money in nominal terms, but you're breaking even on in real terms. Of course, this is if you held your I bonds uh, for the year and continue to hold thereafter. Because if you hold I bonds for less than 1 year, or sorry, less than 5 years, you do have to forfeit the previous 3 months of interest. Of course, what I said earlier about buying towards the end of the month and then cashing in towards the beginning of the month will mitigate some of the loss, but some quick of the envelope math is 9.62% times half, and then plus 6.5% times a quarter. And half because you're getting the yield for half the year, and then here you're getting the yield for a quarter of the year. And it's a quarter of the year because you forfeit the previous 3 months. So in real terms, you are basically so actually, if you would have to forfeit 3 months of interest, you would only be making 6.4%. With that being said, 6.4% is a lot better than any savings account out there. So, and in fact, I read this a little while back. This is a piece published in August 2020 by John Ruckenthaler of Morningstar, and he basically did some investigation about like how I bonds would have done in this period. Let's see. So this always confuses me. So green is I bonds. Orange is 1 to 3 year U.S. Treasury notes. Blue is I bond with a 0% fixed rate, and red is U.S. Treasury bills. So I bonds with a high fixed rate have definitely done the best, and it's also done so with the lowest standard deviation. I bonds, even with a 0% fixed rate, have been pretty much in line with this was it US 1 to 3 year U.S. Treasury notes. This is with dividends, not dividends. This is with interest reinvestment, something like that. I read this a while ago, but what John called the prognosis was it actually might make sense to have I bonds in your account. Let's see. He said, yep. He says that they merit serious consideration for strategic portfolios, and unquote. And this is especially in a time where inflation and higher interest rates are, I guess, becoming more on trend. So I guess I'll link all of this in the description, and it's definitely worth a read. And last but not least, one of my savings accounts is with this company called Yotta. It would be called a fintech. It's a savings account, and I have like some savings with them. But the most interesting thing is they've actually introduced what's called an ibond bucket. So instead of buying ibonds directly through treasurydirect.com, .gov, you should be able to buy it through Yotta. I personally haven't done this, but I've used Yotta in the past, and I've had no problems with them using their savings account. So I would imagine their ibond product would also roll up pretty well. The only thing is I don't know how they're actually don't actually know like how they're working with the Treasury Department to do this, but in hindsight, like Treasury Direct is a little bit cumbersome to set up and and like buy ibonds with, but it's not like that problematic. But like Yotta has like a really good interface, and I think their savings account product is pretty good. Um, I started using this back in 2020, and back then, like every bank was giving paltry yields. So being able to get like 2% yield on like a Yotta account was actually great. Of course, now many banks, well, not like traditional banks, but lots of other institutions do give relatively good rates, ibonds included. Although the ibond is not an institution. Um, so I guess I think they probably do have a referral program, but if I remember, it's not very good. But if anyone's interested, you can, I guess, drop a comment and I'll respond. But if I remember right, the referral is not very good. And I'm not necessarily advocating for this, but I know if you don't, I know many people have, I could say maybe opposition to using government websites because it's clunky, but that's an alternative. But regardless, yep, I'll put everything in the description. And yeah, 9.6% has definitely treated us really well for the people who did have ibonds. Um, let's see. I was perusing through this earlier, and let's see. So these are fixed rates, but um, yeah, inflation rates here. So this like 4.8% has been really high. This 3.56% was the ibond yields right before this current 6 month span, and this was also really high. It's basically got you a yield of like a little bit more than 7%. It's got you a yield of 9.6%. So uh, so so like these two and the yield we're expecting to see in the next 6 month stretch. These are three of the highest inflation numbers that we've seen, CPI-U, that is. Um, and if you read the Q&A, it does say if CPI-U goes negative, the inflation rate, um, uh, this like 2 times inflation semi-annual inflation rate won't go negative. So like I guess if you want it to be like very technical, I guess you could say like the absolute value of this. I guess like the absolute value of this and the absolute value of this. So, but anyway, I'll leave it at that.